Morning, everyone. My name is Roisin Morris-Drennan. I am Senior Manager in QQI's Research and Innovation Division, which manages a programme of activity called Rethinking Assessment. And Rethinking Assessment, as hopefully the name suggests, is really about, I suppose, encouraging people to take the time to reflect on assessment and to really kind of adapt and evolve our approaches to assessment to make sure that they remain fit for purpose, really, that they are valid and reliable and fair in this increasingly changing world in which we find ourselves. In that vein, I'd like to welcome you all here today, whether in person or our colleagues joining us online. It's been really encouraging to see the level of interest in this event today from further education and training, higher education, and a really diverse range of other stakeholders as well. And important, I think, that all of those perspectives are here and contributing to this conversation. So welcome, and we're really grateful that you've chosen to be with us today. I do have a few housekeeping matters to get through. In the event of a fire alarm, the fire exits are just behind you, and the assembly point is at the front of the hotel, just across the road. We would ask that you switch your phone and any devices to silent mode. As you can hopefully see on the screens, closed captions are available, and those will be in operation throughout the day. For those who are here, on your name badge, you will see a QR code which links to the programme for today. And for those who are online, we will post a link to that programme in the Zoom chat. You will also have a QR code for our Slido facility for today, and that will enable you to post comments and questions. And also we'll post a link to that in the Zoom chat also. And just for our online audience, just to be aware that we in the room here won't see the Zoom chat, our presenters won't see it, so if you do have any comments or questions, please do just use the Slido for those. The proceedings are being recorded, and we'll make the recordings available in the next few weeks, and presentations are also available for those who want to view them. Today's event is a collaboration between QQI and AHEAD and the Disability Advisors Working Network. And we wanted to begin really by outlining our respective interests in inclusive assessment and standards and the motivations for today's event. So I'd firstly like to introduce Dara Ryder, CEO of AHEAD, who will be tag teaming with me up here today on emceeing duties. And will now introduce the drivers for today really from AHEAD's perspective. So welcome, Dara.
Thanks very much, Roisin. A huge thanks to QQI for opening their doors to this conversation, and to our colleagues in the Disability Advisors Working Network. I think some of the earliest conversations that happened around this before we even came to QQI with this idea was in our conversations with Don. So I'd like to thank them. Also, I'd like to thank Celia O'Shea and Lisa Padden, who joined that planning group for this event as practitioners and contributed significantly to it. So I suppose from an AHEAD perspective, our interest in this topic, of course, comes more from the concepts of promoting social inclusion and from the role of equitable pathways through education in facilitating opportunities for everyone in life to succeed, and to recognise, as we do with the universal design concept, that there are many, many different ways to reach the same destination, and all are equal. Our system really needs to reflect all of that, and it's particularly important in the context of the rising diversity within our tertiary education population. We've seen rising diversity in a whole number of ways in recent decades, and that's added a real richness to our system and indeed to our society. And of course, central to all of that is equitable pathways through education. And equitable pathways means equity in assessment, because if we can't demonstrate what they know, if learners can't do that, then they can't progress and they can't succeed. So for the cohort that we in AHEAD are most kind of familiar with and working most closely with, our disabled students. Of course, this event talks about the variability in the whole student population in all sorts of different ways. But in terms of the cohort that we work most closely with, and disabled students, they've long told us, anecdotally, I suppose, around their issues with certain forms of assessment. In particular, timed written exams as a kind of a dominant mode of assessment are particularly regularly cited to AHEAD by the student cohorts that we deal with as often very significant barriers. In recent years, we've kind of seen this mass social experiment with the move to alternative modes of assessment that took place in response to COVID-19 and the lockdowns that kind of arose as a feature of that, and the pivot very much away from the timed in-person exams that happened during that period. So across that period, HEAD actually conducted a 3-series research study, so 3 different research studies, which culminated in the Changing Landscapes report. My colleague, Dr. Richard Healy, led out on this work. He's here today. And one of the final one of those also looked at the return to post-lockdown learning and looked at the sort of situation then. So I'd like to just set the scene maybe by reading out 2 of the quotes from participants in that research, which speak to the impact that this move had on them, this move to the alternative modes and away from the timed exam as the dominant mode of assessment. Indeed, I could have picked any of many other similar quotes from students in the research, but these are kind of indicative of some of the things that we saw around the assessment piece. So this student in the 2022 survey is speaking to the impact on the move away from exams to this alternative mode, and they're saying, I really hated times exams. I found myself to be very anxious doing them. The pressure of being asked to show what you learned in such a short time. Overall, and this is in reference to the move, my grades went up from around a C average to like a B plus average. So it kind of went up significantly. So I find it's been much, much better. And this other student similarly talks about their experience. And this quote, they're actually looking ahead, this is in the final study, to the post-lockdown return. And, you know, I suppose fearing that this will revert backwards to what was there pre-lockdown. So this has reminded me of one thing I'll really miss from having things being online. No memory alone based exams. In first year, I failed my psychology exams and I scraped passes in my criminology ones. Now in my second year, in both of my subjects for end-of-term assignments for criminology and exams for psychology, which were open book but still timed, I've been top 5 to 10 in my entire year. Top 5 to 10, and that just really stuck with me, you know. So we have same student, same subjects, but a different assessment instrument leading to radically different outcomes for these students. In recent years, I suppose I've become much more embedded in my understanding of the broader assessment discourse. You know, I was very much, I am an inclusion head, a proud social inclusion head, and that's where I sit, and those are my people. But actually, I've made a much more concerted effort in recent years to become much more familiar with the broader discourse and the broader discussions around academic integrity, assessment, etc. What struck me as I read this research actually was that a lot of the questions folks were asking in those forums were actually the same as those raised in our Changing Landscapes report, but actually from a different perspective. And that really is the question of, are our awards a fair and real reflection of what students can and cannot do in relation to a particular subject and a set of standards or outcomes? Because if we don't have confidence in that our assessments are valid and reliable, can we really stand over our awards? If we don't have confidence that our assessments are secure, can we really stand over our awards? But equally and just as importantly, in my view, if students don't have fair and equitable pathways to demonstrate their learning, then can we really stand over our awards? So you see, it's actually the same conversation, really. So I suppose hopefully this event is like inclusion folks, meet the assessment and academic integrity folks, and hopefully that'll be a really interesting dialogue that we have to have. But this is why it's so important to bring all of us into the room together and to get us working together on this topic. And the timing, I think, couldn't be better for these very vital conversations to begin. Why, you might be thinking? Well, I think we all remember that period during COVID when we sort of loudly proclaimed that we can never go back. You know, we all remember those times. But I think what we've seen post-COVID, or certainly anecdotally, is that we've actually seen a race back to the exam hall at an alarming rate. And I think particularly since the arrival of generative AI, that this has become supercharged. And what I'm kind of seeing is that really in the panic that's ensuing from this, security is trumping all other factors. It's now the be-all and end-all in some of these conversations. And I think that's a very bad thing in terms of we really need to broaden that out again and really consider what is good assessment practice again, and indeed what is equitable assessment practice. So we're very much letting Gen I, in my view, lead us down the garden path and letting it set the agenda for us, when I think a much more balanced and considered approach is needed, albeit one that respects the very real threats that those issues pose. So I suppose, in my view, this event, and I suppose QQI will have a different take on it, and that's really welcome. And Padraig will come in shortly with his tee up for this event. So in my view, this event is an attempt to have a much more mature conversation about all of this, to rebalance the scales between validity, between security, between equity assessment, and to place them on an equal footing, to try to bring our attention maybe to some of those things that we have almost complete control over, rather than maybe for the last number of years focusing so much energy on these other threats which we have much less control over as a system. So it's about valid, secure and inclusive assessment. And really, I think it's fantastic that we have forums like this where we can bring these different perspectives together and get a better understanding of each other. Because I, as a social inclusion head, have learned so much in the last few years by engaging much deeper in the assessment and academic integrity discourse and understanding the real concerns on those sides. And equally, I hope the exchange is fruitful the other way. So I'm going to stop rambling now, because I could talk about this stuff all day. But I'd like now to introduce Dr. Padraig Walsh, CEO of QQI, who couldn't join us in person as he's away in Germany on another engagement, but is able to join us online. So, Padraig, if you'd like to take it away whenever you're ready, feel free to jump in there.
Thanks very much, Dara, and good morning to everybody. As Dara said, my name is Padraig Walsh. I'm the Chief Executive here in QQI. Delighted to be able to welcome you to today's seminar on inclusive assessment and standards in a changing and dynamic world. Sorry I can't be with you in person, but as Dara mentioned, the wonders of technology now allows me to talk to you from Hanover, Germany, where I'm attending the Members Forum of the European Association for Quality Assurance in Higher Education, ENQA, on behalf of QQI. QQI is delighted to collaborate with the head and Dawn in what's a very topical and increasingly relevant area for the sector. We want to acknowledge the important work that both of these organisations do, and we would like to encourage participants to engage with their research and their other activities to advance inclusive environments for people with disabilities. One of the things we're trying to achieve through today's event, and in fact in our ongoing work, is to mainstream the idea of inclusion. Inclusion is not about responding to the needs of particular categories of learners, for example, learners with disability. Everyone is different in ways that we are increasingly coming to recognise, and our learning environment should seek to facilitate the broad diversity of the learners they serve, to support their full participation and recognise their educational attainment. Assessment is important to QQI. From our perspective, the quality of an award is intrinsically linked to the quality of the assessment. We consider the operation of fair, consistent and effective assessment practice as an essential linchpin in supporting confidence in our qualification. We also recognise that, in addition to evaluating learning, that assessment can have a huge influence on what is learned. At the most recent events in the QQI Rethinking Assessment series last January, we reflected on the role of learning outcomes in assessment and the importance of ensuring alignment between those learning outcomes and assessment to ensure that assessment practice acts to reinforce and not to distort or to bypass the acquisition and demonstration of those learning outcomes. Educational standards, by their nature, specify expectations of knowledge, skill, and competence. Through assessment, we determine the extent to which those standards have been met. When we talk of a learning outcomes model for qualifications, we specify intended learning outcomes that a student or learner is meant to achieve. Careful design and implementation of authentic assessment allows us to see if those intended learning outcomes become achieved learning outcomes. The purpose of today's event is to encourage reflection on whether the means by which we are assessing learners, and indeed the standards against which they are assessed, might unnecessarily or unjustifiably discriminate against or disadvantage particular learners. And if so, how can we respond? We would like to use today's seminar to highlight QQI's wider Rethinking Assessment programme, which we established in recognition of the importance of assessment for the quality of the educational experience and of our qualification system. In addition to the events and masterclass series, such as today's event, As part of our 10-year anniversary programme back in 2023, QQI provided €374,000 in grant funding to advance scholarship in assessment. 8 research projects within Irish higher education institutions will conclude in the coming months, and we look forward to sharing the learning and the resources generated from those projects with you in due course. We are also reviewing QQI's guidance on assessment to ensure that it remains reflective of and responsive to contemporary learning contexts. We look forward to hearing your views this afternoon on the potential development of national principles on inclusive assessment. We think that assessment should be everyone's concern and should remain at the top of the agenda for those tasked with ensuring its quality and integrity. Today's event, which encompasses participants and delegates from the further education and training and higher education sectors, learners, professional statutory and regulatory bodies, and international perspectives, is reflective of the importance that QQI attaches to partnership, which is identified as a key enabler in our current statement of strategy. Our remit is such that we benefit from a broad and diverse stakeholder network, and we know from experience that bringing people together from diverse backgrounds can have very catalyzing and generative effects. We appreciate your participation today and the commitment that signals to advancing more inclusive learning environments. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a very enjoyable and worthwhile seminar over the rest of the day. Thank you.